is not a reticent crowd. I know that by reputation. I'm going to ask you, Izzy, I love the name Izzy. You tell me about St. John's.
I mean, at least for me, St. John's is all about like community and like meeting people and coming together. Even if you're different, just coming together and like loving each other and just like, I don't know, learning together.
And Peyton, you tell me what it's all about.
I was just gonna say our motto is like enter to learn, leave to serve.
Who else? Nick?
Going off what Izzy said, I think St. John's is more about like community and learning and like just learning together and like being together and like helping each other out.
Who else? Let me see on another screen. Who else? Alex, tell me about St. John's.
It's about students who come to grow as a person, individual, and to learn more.
Brendan?
Yeah, it's a great community. Like it's a great Catholic community, and we really all learn together.
Somebody, I don't know whether anybody will do this or not. We'll hold it confidentially. Does anybody in this group want to tell me a nickname you have for one of your teachers?
Ooh.
Any teacher, any nickname. And don't tell me you don't have nicknames for them. All right, who's gonna step up? Well, if you want, I'm going to tell you the nicknames of some of my teachers. When I was at school, I graduated 62 years ago from Jefferson High School in Lafayette, Indiana. Unlike you, I went from a Catholic grade school to a public high school. And it's not easy, by the way, because and maybe some of you have had that experience coming from a private grade school into Catholic high school, but you know, you're changing environments. But we had the principal of our high school, we called Spider, because his last name was Webb. His real name was Cecil, by the way. We had a physics teacher named Murray, and we called him Nugget Murray, because he came from a town right outside of Lafayette, Indiana called Klondike. Those of you who might remember from history, the Klondike Gold Rush. Our biology teacher was named Bug. Get it? Bug 90 was his name. And we had it was a great journalism professor. He was actually just a teacher, high school teacher. His name, we called him Fat Jack for one reason. He was large. And then another biology teacher who also coached basketball, we called him, his last name was Lazar. We called him Punchy John because he was punchy. And there's a reason I'm doing this nickname thing, because my all-time favorite teacher that changed my life at your age, he asked people, strangely enough, to call himself Daddy Fats. Daddy Fats Fraser. And he would say, my name is Fraser as an eraser. And he started me getting interested in television and radio and all the stuff that I've done for my entire life. Mr. Maloney started out doing years ago. And I mention him because I tried to think about you and the environment you're in right now and what this environment means for the rest of your life. As a matter of fact, I watched the video on St. John's video, and the messages that were being sent on that video were fascinating to me, because they really are the same kind of things that people like me, when they're asked to speak in front of classes, always say the same thing. But the one word, and I'm looking at my notes, that I liked a lot was passion. That they suggest that St. John's wants to help you develop a passion for anything. And I can hear it in your voices that there is a passion there at the school. And certainly when I was with old Daddy Fats back there in the early days of my broadcasting experience. He helped me develop a passion for broadcasting, communicating. And the whole thing you said about creating a community, believe it or not, at a public school, we were creating a community. The other thing that you say on your website is that you're meeting some of the best people. These are quotes that I wrote down, you'll ever meet in your life. And when you leave St. John's, you'll say it was one of the greatest experiences of your life. All that is going to be true. So as I look back on my own life, I started with a bunch of teachers that all those names were not derogatory. We liked them. We liked our teachers a lot. And Daddy Fats taught me that if you really want to be in an industry like broadcasting, you got to learn the basics. And you all have so much, not only in your school, but in the communications world. We had none of that when I was growing up. I'm not complaining about it. Sometimes I wonder if we're not overwhelmed today by all the communications that we have. But having grown up, now you grew up in a big city area. I grew up in a tiny little city area. I grew up in a town that was almost all white. You've grown up in a town with all this wonderful diversity. And so in many, many ways, you're way ahead of where I was. But the basics are there back in 1959 as they are today. And just to connect all this, some of my best friends in life are people that I went to high school with. As a matter of fact, I was on the phone this morning with a buddy of mine. He's just turned 80 and I'm 79. And I, of course, was welcoming to the next decade. But every day of my life, I probably talked to somebody I went to high school with. And you had the tools to do this forever. We had the phone, but to give you an idea of how things have changed, when I was your age, to make a long distance phone call, probably to Washington, D.C. from Indiana, was about $1.50 a minute. Today, you can pay that monthly fee and call as often as you want anywhere in the country and sometimes anywhere in the world. So what's happened over the last many years since I was your age is that communications has changed dramatically. And why did I get involved in something called C-SPAN, which, by the way, is, for those of you who've never watched it, is nothing more or less than turning a camera on the activities of this town and letting you see the whole thing. Sadly, and I say this almost with a smile on my face, sadly, for the last 42 years that we've been in business, we have been called boring. And we've just been through one of the least boring periods in our history, at least in my history. And sadly for you, you're going through this period of impeachment and a lot of negative media coverage of politicians at a very young age. And I hope that it only can get better for you. For me, it's gotten worse and worse. So putting a spotlight on this town has really amounted to watching democracy change dramatically because of the communication system. And the simple way to describe what C-SPAN is, first and foremost, it's not owned and operated by the government. It's done by a private business. And that business is called cable television. And those of you may or may not even have cable in your home anymore, because we've had something called cord cutting going on now for the last 6-7 years, where people are abandoning cable, going to the internet, connecting to a Netflix or a Prime or a Hulu, one of these things. And so we've had an interesting experience at C-SPAN where we grew all through the years, and now the numbers are going down. But as I tell a lot of people, we're going to survive. We're not going to have the impact that we had earlier in our career. But when my first car in life was an Oldsmobile. They don't exist. My first magazine that I read was U.S. News and World Report. It's online, but has no footprint of any kind anymore. My first job in Washington in the media was UPI, United Press International. You've never heard of it. Doesn't exist anymore. So we're going through an interesting period right now of where there's been this dramatic change where you have more communications than you could possibly ever hope to have. And the good thing about it is that you all can use it to apply to the whole mission of your school, which is staying in touch, continuing with the community, developing a passion, and meeting some of the best people you ever know. I think since I left high school, I've had 10 reunions. Now, you may or may not ever come back to a reunion, but I can tell you that I never dreamed that they'd be fun. They're fun every time, and it's exciting to watch what's happened to people. And the interesting thing about life is that some people become dramatically successful and other people don't. But that doesn't mean you can't stay friends. Some people, and I'm thinking of particularly of a couple of people I know in my hometown. One of them never went to college. The other one made millions. And they are still very close friends, as I am close friends with both of them. And in spite of the fact that in today's society, money means so much to everybody, that if you keep your eye on your friendships and the value of your friendships, the money will be reduced in importance and you'll just deal with the individual. That's just a little background of where I'm coming from, and I'd love to hear more from you about what matters to you, what your passions are, how you communicate. And frankly, somebody, to open this discussion, somebody tell me what the impact has been about using Zoom for the last year. Anybody, or I'm going to call on you. Who could say? Sophie, tell me what you think of the experience with Zoom versus being in the classroom.
There definitely hasn't been the same social interaction and the relationships built between students and teachers. But I think if you apply yourself fully, you're able to get the same educational standard. It's just changes the whole experience you have, as you are very much independent and an individual working instead of a community.
What do you think it's done to your ability to learn?
I think it's made me more independent and resourceful because I have to manage on my own and not rely on others so much to get what I need.
By the way, what's your passion in life right now?
I would love to be a doctor one day.
Terrific. Right below you is Brianna. And that is a great name because you know it really means Brian. So Brianna, tell me about your Zoom experience.
Well, I'm currently with my siblings because my parents have to go to work, so it's harder to learn kind of, but it doesn't really make a difference.
How old are your siblings?
6, 5, and 3.
And do you have to take care of them during the day?
Yeah. He's like being kind of loud right now.
That's okay. What's your passion?
Women's health, so I want to be a doctor as well.
Wow. What about Delaney? What do you think of the Zoom experience? What have you learned?
To be honest, I first thought it was okay because I thought it was kind of like a break from some of the in-school pressures. But as I went on, it was getting a bit harder to stay like motivated. But then I also, like Sophia said, I kind of gained those abilities to learn.
And do you have a passion at this point?
I'm interested in civil engineering.
Well, Mr. Maloney and I would highly recommend Purdue University, which has a great civil engineering school. And as a matter of fact, my buddy who I went to school with at my high school and at Purdue, who I did talk to earlier this morning, is a civil engineering graduate from Purdue. I'll see if I can get a recommendation for you from him. Graydon, speak up. Let us know what you think. Tell us about the Zoom experience.
I think that since it was so sudden, a lot of people didn't have time to prepare. And as such, it was kind of like a shock to everybody. And even though it's been getting better over time, people just don't learn and communicate the same way over a Zoom call than in person. And I think that everybody's taken a hit.
Have you taken any advantage in the new media world we live in to research via the internet?
Well, I've always done that, but I'd say now more so than before.
Can you give us an idea where you might go for information on the internet? Some site that you find very useful.
Well, not Wikipedia articles, but the sources cited within them.
Let me just say something about Wikipedia.
Hmm.
I feel differently about it than most teachers. I find Wikipedia, I use Wikipedia all the time, every day. And I find it to be incredibly reliable up to a point. You always have to double check things, but it is one of the most unbelievably successful human interactions and development of information ever created in the history of the world. It doesn't get that kind of attention though, but there is so much valuable information that's passed on Wikipedia, and you never hear anybody talk about it. Almost never. A lot of these communications networks think they have the corner on the information market. Wikipedia is unbelievably powerful, but thanks for mentioning it. What's your passion, by the way, Graydon?
I'd say I want to either be a politician or an archaeologist if one or the other doesn't work out.
Wow. That's a nice bookend there to deal with.
Yeah.
And is it Nehan? Is that the way you pronounce it?
Yeah, that's how you pronounce it.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Do you have a passion?
Yes, when I'm older, I would like to be a lawyer in criminal law field.
Why?
Especially when I was younger. When I was younger, I used to be scared of watching those like criminal shows. But as I've gotten older, I found it pretty interesting to like see how the human mind works and why people would do those type of things, and also look past what they do, but also why they do it. So just being able to, go deeper and like find a person's reasoning for doing something has really interested me.
Have you had time to watch any programs currently on this kind of thing?
I usually watch Dateline with my father, or I watch like ID, like Evil Lives Here, like stuff like that, like real live investigations that have happened or that are going on right now currently.
The interesting thing about ID is that it's owned by the Discovery Communications Company,
Mm-hmm.
which used to be based out here in Silver Spring. But the interesting thing about how that was created was the man that started Discovery went to the University of Maryland. And this was in my lifetime. He started in 1985. And he started it because he thought people ought to see more documentaries. And he started it for all the right reasons. And out of that, of course, developed Shark Week, which doesn't have anything to do with Discovery documentaries, which is just an example of in life, you start out with something called Discovery, and it's about documenting the society we live in, and it goes all the way to Shark Week. Who has an opinion on why that happened? Why do you think that happened? Aaron, why do you think that happened? There's one word to describe why that happened.
Wait, could you say like what happened?
I'll say it again. It started out as the reason for being to create a channel with documentaries, serious documentaries about the world we live in, and ended up with a week called Shark Week. Why did it evolve into Shark Week from documentaries? There's one word to describe it, and it can be applied to every aspect of your life going forward. And if anybody else has it, jump in.
I don't have the word. I'm sorry.
Anybody have it? Theodore? Huh?
Is it money?
Bingo. Outstanding. For those of you who didn't hear it, he got clipped a little bit. The word is money. When they got in business for all the right reasons and the right passion, then money took over. Money always takes over. And I can tell you right now, as you go through the rest of your life, just keep an eye on money. You may or may not care about money, and therefore you might be able to go off and do something. Mr. Maloney will laugh about this, or Kristen, you might be able to teach because you don't make a lot of money teaching. But in all of the business that I've been involved in, communications business, it always has ended up being about money. And so what you see right now happening, of course, with the cable television industry is that they don't make money much anymore off of television. They make it off of the internet. Therefore, that's how you get to Prime and Netflix, and they're all creating their own channels like Peacock. I can go down the list. And they own, all these companies own all these streaming channels. But this little network that I'm involved with loses out in that process because we don't make money for anybody. And when you don't make money for somebody, they look at you differently than when you do. Who else wants to tell me about your passion? Santiago. I can't see you though.
My passion, you said?
Yeah, but first of all, Santiago, what's that flag over your right shoulder?
It's the Colombian flag. I'm half Colombian.
Half Colombian, what's the other half?
25% Irish and 25% Venezuelan.
What a great mix as somebody who's 60% Irish. All right, tell us your passion.
So right now, my passion, I would like to become a virologist. So studying viruses, working in the field, catching them before they can ever get out. Or I would like to be a computer or a software engineer.
Well, you're in a great town to do both of those if you stay here. Who else can tell us about your passion on the screen? Felicity?
I would say I'm kind of exploring all fields right now. I think that I'm really interested in a lot of like work fields. So anything ranging from like agriculture to politics to medicine, I'm pretty interested in it.
What's your frustration level because of COVID?
I'd say I'm pretty frustrated. At first, I didn't have a huge problem with it. And then it reached a certain point where it's like, I just need to get out.
And do you get out now?
Not really. I have swim practice a couple times a week, but that's about it.
You know, COVID has changed our life at C-SPAN dramatically. We have 3 television networks, and they're very appropriately titled C-SPAN 1, C-SPAN 2, and C-SPAN 3. Ingenious names. But what's changed for us completely is that we now use Zoom every day, all day. I'm looking over at our screen right now, and we have a show that we're rerunning from this morning, and both of the guests on the screen are zoomed in. We would have never done that or able to have done that in the past, and it's kept us alive during this period. And if you haven't noticed, if you watch any of television news anywhere, they all use it. And with Communications Today, the anchors of these different programs are operating out of their homes often. They bring the cameras into their homes. They can inexpensively transmit them back to the studio and then out through the cable systems or the satellites or whatever on the streaming devices. Let's see here. Somebody else tell me about your Shannon. Good morning, Shannon.
Good morning. Asking about my passion or okay. I'm going to nursing school this fall, so my hope is to become like an ER nurse after graduation.
Why are you doing nursing school?
I don't know. I've just always been interested in like medicine, but I don't want to be a doctor. Like I want to be more involved with the patients. So yeah.
So are you the one that's going to tell me a nickname from one of your teachers?
I mean, it's not really like much of a nickname, but sometimes Mr. Cooper likes to be called Mr. Coop. That's the only one I can think of though.
Yeah, it's not quite as bad as Bug 90 is one of our teachers, but it's, you know, close. Who else is it Kim or is it in Kim? Explain that.
It's Natalie.
Hi, Natalie. What's your passion?
It's kind of specific, but I want to do cybersecurity in the military.
Where does that come from?
Well, I have quite a few family members in the military, and I want to help. I want to do something for my country. And I just happen to be good at computers as well.
How many of you, and I'm looking at one screen, now put your hand out, how many of you are in your junior ROTC plan there at St. John's? Natalie is. Anybody on the other screen? Let me just check and see. Get your, all right, hands up. Okay. And Graydon, why do you do that?
For some of the same reasons that Natalie said, I have a lot of family members in the military and a long military history, and it just feels right to go on in the future to serve my country.
Let me just say, I was in the Navy, and I graduated from Purdue University in 1963, and we had something called the draft then. You either went on to another grad school or a law school, or at that time, which was a really strange policy of this government, you got married and had a child, which really was a bizarre way to avoid the draft. My brother did that. The good news is I have I have two nieces and one nephew as a result of that marriage, but it was really a bad idea to rush to a marriage and have children in order to avoid the draft. But the point I was going to make with it, I went into the Navy. I volunteered for the Navy. It's the most important thing I've ever done. High school wasn't that. College wasn't that. Coming to Washington wasn't that. But by going in the Navy, and again, I'm sure you folks have traveled overseas. Some of you, we never thought about that possibility when I was your age. And by going in the Navy, you get a tremendous amount of responsibility quickly. In other words, when I was 22 years old, standing on the deck of a ship, steaming across the Atlantic, I was given what they call the watch, and I was responsible for where that ship went. Well, you do not get that kind of responsibility when you're 22 outside of the Navy. It just, or outside of the service. And so I just would say to you, those of you who are interested, or those of you who might be thinking about being interested, that going into the military may not sound like your ideal place to spend your life, but it is a fantastic place to learn and get experience. Annika, I don't think you've told me your passion.
I'm really interested in like maybe history or political science.
Why?
I don't know, like history has just always interested me, and I really like I'm taking European history now, and it's really interesting to me, and I like just like learning about the past and like how people lived and stuff.
So how do you go about learning your history besides books?
Yeah, I don't know. I just like I talk to my teachers a lot, and I sometimes go to like online seminars about like I went to one about the history of DC architecture that was really interesting. And yeah, I read a lot of books about it.
I'll give you a personal experience, and those of you who if you don't think you're interested in history, I think if you try it out, you'd be surprised how fantastic it is. When I got into this business and I did a lot of on-camera interviewing of historians, I still do. I made contacts back in the early 90s with 4 or 5 really fantastic historians. And I was interviewing a fellow one day about a book he called The Magic Bus. And his name's Doug Brinkley, who's now one of the more visible historians on television. But Doug Brinkley told the story about when he taught at Hofstra University on Long Island, that he got an old bus. He put about 16, 17 bunk beds on this bus. Doubt if you could get away with this today. And took students from Hofstra on a 6-week tour of historical sites in the United States. They would sleep on this bus and go from historical site to historical site, and he would teach them about that. And I also was interviewing another fellow, his name is Richard Norton Smith, who turned out to be today a very good friend of mine. But he told me when he was 9 years old, he talked his parents into taking him. They would go on a trip every summer, and he said, "Well, I'll go on a trip with you, but we gotta stop at historical sites." And so he said, we stopped at every gravesite of every president. And as I'm sitting there saying to myself, I'm going to do that. This all is going to sound a little weird to you, but those of you who want to learn history, and the point of this story, Annika, is you go to the place where history was made. This is a great time to do that in. But I then went to every gravesite of every president, primarily to learn, because on your way there and the way out of there, you're learning a lot about location, you're learning about the person and where they lived. And I took a picture of myself at every place. At 3 of the grave sites, there was not even anybody there. I had to do the selfie thing, and this was years ago, before they had selfies. And so I made a little booklet up, and I went to Richard Norton Smith, who was a historian, and I put this on his desk, and I said, I did it. And then I had to figure out how to beat him. So I decided then to go to every gravesite of every vice president, which is beginning, I know in your mind, to sound really crazy. But that 14 of our presidents had been vice presidents. So I had 14 out of at the time, I think it was 45 vice presidents. But all of that leads me just to keep emphasizing the value of place. And this network has spent the last 40 years going to places, showing our audience places, not in a sophisticated way, but just saying, here's a president's house, talking to somebody that knows about the house, and just passing on to those people who care about the background on these historical figures. Along the way, the figures aren't nearly as important as the information that you can find about how the country operates. And I'm sure you have all been talking about right now, how does this country operate, and what have we just lived through, and what does that mean? And I would like to switch the subject to that for a moment and ask you all to tell me what this last couple of months has meant to you. Bridget, tell me what your reaction is to this whole process, the election, the impeachment, the whole thing.
I mean, I feel like it's kind of stressful just because so many people have so many different opinions, and it's hard to, I don't know, especially in this day and age, like be friends with people who like have differing opinions, even though like I definitely am, but people are so focused on your opinion, and which really shouldn't matter.
Bridget, how many different opinions are there in your own family?
I don't know, 1 or 2.
Has it caused a problem?
No.
Anybody else have a reaction to that? Maria, tell us about the political season we've just lived through.
It's been interesting because I get to learn about everything. Like there's a lot of things you get to learn just about politics in general. So it kind of like opens that up, and like you get to like form your own opinions based on what you hear and stuff like that. And it opens up opportunities for the future. If you want to go into something like that, you're exposed to it.
Where do you get most of your information?
Mainly like the news or social media, but a lot of it from the news.
Where do you go for your news?
I think it's NBC News. I know my parents watch that at night, so I watch it with them.
Evan, what about this political season? Have you seen any differences of opinion in your own family?
I haven't really seen much of a difference, but I do have some opinions on the way it was kind of handled. That I think George Washington he said it kind of straight when there was a lot of difference in political party at the beginning of the United States coming together. How he said he didn't really want that this unification that was really prompted really in the last few months.
So are we better off having lived through what we just lived through, or worse off?
I think I think we're kind of better for it because we get to understand what we did wrong and what we should be doing right in this new presidency, how we can actually kind of fix it.
Okay, Brendan, what can you tell us?
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question is, what has been the impact of this last couple of months, the political season, the election, the impeachment on you?
I mean, I've definitely learned a lot more about, like, I didn't really know a whole lot about politics until this. It's definitely become a much more popular, like, family discussion at dinner. And we all pretty much have the same, like, there's really no disagreements on it, but it's definitely just been a more of a dinner topic thing than before.
Have you had disagreements at all with your fellow classmates?
Not really. I mean, I don't really talk to them about that. So I really haven't had disagreements on that with them.
Let me go to the other screen, that I hope I'm not missing anybody. Yeah. Who's on here that, how do you, the last name, Sophia, how do you pronounce your first name? Is she?
Sophie Mateus.
I'm sorry. No, go ahead, Sophia. I see a last name of Sophia, and I was asking her, but go ahead. Tell us what's your reaction to the political season?
I've actually found it quite hard on a religious standpoint, because I know a lot about what our scripture teacher in particular was telling us, that if we want to show love, we have to show the most love to the people we hate most. And I feel like when there are people who are doing things I disagree with, especially in the political field, it's very difficult to show love. And to then go and say, I'm still going to be friends with these people, I'm still going to be kind to them, has been very challenging, because I definitely disagree with them on a moral standpoint, but we have to still be kind.
Derek, what do you say?
About the effect of the political stuff?
Yeah, does any of it matter? You paying attention to it?
Yeah, I've been paying attention. I've always been interested in politics and current events, really.
Are we better off, worse off? What give us your take on the last
compared, like compared to what?
Just in your lifetime, do you think this is an important period, and does it have any impact, positive or negative, on the country?
I think people are doing what they can to try to improve the state of affairs in this country.
So you're not worried?
Well, I can't say I'm not worried at all.
What about Owen? Talk to us.
At this point, I've been so tired of politics that I've really just drifted away from the news more. I feel like there's news every day that makes me mad personally from politics. So I just try to, I just don't watch it as much, because now I find just the news really makes me mad.
What's your passion, by the way, Owen?
My passion, I love numbers in sports. So, if there's something on that branch, I would definitely love to do that.
Mr. Maloney, are you there? Are you awake? You have to unmute yourself. Please unmute yourself. Come on, come with the programmer.
So should I turn video off then?
No, we must have a picture. Tell me, you've taught for a lot of years. What do you see different today in your students than you did, say, 10 years ago?
Wow. I guess I'm going to echo you, but I guess it's all the social stuff. And I'm excited for the kids because they have this ability with friendships. There's so much that's good about it. But I actually this year, and I think you told me about it actually, Mr. Lamb, Social Dilemma on Netflix, the special. And I don't know if any of you guys, I don't have any of you in class, but I made my students watch it because just to realize, like you said earlier, everything's monetized. So that every social media is delivering a service which you can use for different ways, but they want to get in your pocket, back to Mr. Lamb's point. And just if we know that, and I'm just worried we're doing a lousy job, I'm doing a lousy job as a teacher, because you should know that. You should know how the media works, because that's how you spend how much time a day, you know? So you should know how it works. You don't necessarily have to know about, and you guys are great, George Washington's, you know, nonpartisan approach. That's great. But boy, if we don't give you the here and now, I think we're failing you.
Kristen Logan, you're not going to get off the hook here. Tell us from your perspective of watching students all the time, what's been the impact?
I think that the expected kind of base level of knowledge about what's going on politically, especially in this area, I think that that has certainly gone up. I was really impressed. I teach 2 freshman classes as well, and I was really impressed by the level of discussion and quite frankly, concern after the Capitol riots, and the way that students were able to talk with each other and address some pretty challenging issues that, as we've seen, the adults in this area can have a hard time with as well. So I think because there's so much media available and so much information available, it's incumbent upon students to really understand the landscape. And I've, again, have been impressed both with this group of scholars as well as with my freshmen at their not only understanding of what's going on, but ability to take an opinion and advocate for their beliefs.
Mr. Lopez, how do you pronounce your first name? Giglio?
It's pronounced Giglio.
Giglio, okay.
Yeah.
You've been listening to this for the last 45 minutes. What's your take?
Well, something I've really taken from all this that's been going on, because I feel like previously when thinking about like the government and people in power and stuff like that, it seemed like it was a bit more, I guess, like distant. It was a bit more out there. When thinking about like the government and like their policies and all that, I never really considered that like normal people actually affected it in any way. And it kind of felt like it was kind of set in stone. So seeing all the events that have been like unfolding, I've been realizing that like people can like mess up stuff and like it impacts everybody, but then it kind of goes the other way as well.
What's your passion?
I'm not really sure right now. I don't get how everybody else has one so quickly, but I'm still looking.
Yeah, I had a passion since I was, as I said, when Daddy Fats got a hold of me in high school, my teacher, ever since then. But there's a lot of people that don't make their decision, and you don't have to for a long time. You really don't. Shannon, any follow-up here?
Yeah, I just like kind of agree with what everyone said. I especially just think like in the past couple weeks, everything that happened, it like honestly makes me kind of sad though to see all the division in the country, like where people are saying like it's hard to be friends with people who like disagree with you. But like I hope that, you know, in the coming years, like because of all that happened, like we'll grow to be like more unified and like be able to accept people or, you know, yeah, just like grow as a country. I think that's really important. So hopefully like that will happen.
Eva. Hello, Eva. Tell us is this period meant anything particularly to you?
I just showed like how some people around you don't believe in the human rights of others. So it just like showed a lot of people's true colors to me. Like I just know some people that I can't be friends with because they don't believe in basic things I think everyone should believe in.
Yeah,
So-
don't be surprised. I mean, that's an interesting thing. I mean, it happens to adults also. I mean, it's been a divider among adults because people feel so strongly on about these issues. Cam, what about you? Tell us your reaction to all this.
I kind of feel like it's highlighted for me, at least the kind of fragility of you know our nation. It's highlighted the fact that much like the dollar, America is just an idea, and the strength of the idea is fully predicated on just the faith that people have in it. And so, you know, it's highlighted that you know when people's faith in things like the validity of their vote or you know, stuff along those lines is shaken, like it really can damage the system and the idea.
Have you got a passion during this time period for anything?
Yeah, right. My passion, I think, is economics. economics and honestly history and just the study of people. And yeah.
Mr. Maloney, yes.
Mr. Lamb, this is awesome. We want to respect your time though, because you probably have things to move on to. So you want to maybe take one more?
You know what people say when they want to respect your time? It's really a message that says, we're really tired of this. Let's go on to other important things.
Remember the word drone?
Yeah.
No, this is fantastic, but seriously, we could do this, but I just wanted to give you
I'm not in a hurry, but I just have a top of the hour. I have to move. As a matter of fact, at the top of the hour, I get to move to a meeting internally here where we're judging what we call student cam, which is high school students getting 5-minute documentaries. And then if you're the grand prize winner, you get $5,000. Just something to tide you over to next year.
Wow.
Yeah. But yeah, I'd be glad to answer any questions, and you can shut it down, of course, Mr. Maloney. We haven't heard from Marjorie Lee, Marge Lee, and she's had a few children in her life and a few grandchildren, and it'd be interesting if she wants to speak up and tell us, you know, what she thinks of this period. It would be interesting to hear from her. Marge. Is Marge going to speak up? Hello, Marge. I think she's chosen not to. Anyway.
Mr. Lamb, can you see the raised hands? If students have questions, I just want to, or you know what, if you have a question, guys, if you want to raise your hand, and then I can feel free to just call on you, because I know some students mentioned they had read articles and watched video clips. So if we do take a couple before it's time, yeah, that'd be awesome. Santiago, go ahead.
Mr. Lamb, how was your interview with Gorbachev?
Memorable, Santiago. Good question. I interviewed him after he was president of Russia, after the coup, when he wrote a book. And you'll laugh at this, but what I first remember, and maybe you read this, I've mentioned it on occasion, before he was due in to talk about his book for an hour on camera in an interview. And he was traveling with his translator, a guy named Pavel Palaschenko. And Pavel speaks perfect English, and called me on the phone about an hour before the interview and said, Mr. Gorbachev is only going to have a half hour for you instead of an hour. And I said, Pavel, that won't work. This is an hour program. We do an hour every week. We don't cut it. And if he's going to come, we're going to have to do an hour. All the while thinking at any moment he'd say, well, we're not coming. So he said, oh, okay, we'll be there. And then about 20 minutes in, he calls again and said, I'm warning you, he's just not going to take an hour. And you got to understand that Mr. Gorbachev did not speak any English. So we had it set up so that the translator could translate me and him at the same time, both in Russian and in English, so that we could get an hour interview instead of a half-hour interview, because it would be simultaneous translation. So anyway, he shows up at the door, and Pavel said to me, Mr. Gorbachev needs to go to the bathroom. And I thought that was a pretty big assignment in my case, is here's a world leader, a famous character. First thing I do is take him to the bathroom. So I walked him back through the engineering department, back into the bathroom. And as he went into the bathroom, Pavel said to me, he can only do 40 minutes. And I said, Pavel, I told you coming in, he's got to do an hour. It's an hour show. And I said, there's nothing to be concerned about. I'm going to talk to him about his book. And so about 2-3 minutes later, he walks out of the bathroom and he speaks to him in Russian, and we're headed toward the studio. And we're walking through the engineering department. It's a mess and everything. As we get to the door, he said to me, he's fine, he'll do the hour. And so that's not very intellectually stimulating, but it's always something that I remember. And the other thing that I remember is asking him in the interview, do you speak English? And he said, no, I don't speak English at all, but my daughter does. And I think that's a great symbol of a change in the world, because I'm sure some of you speak another language. And when I was growing up, that was very rare. But to speak another language is really a plus in life. Is there another question?
Yep, Alex was next.
What has been the biggest obstacle of your career, and do you have any advice for future generations entering that profession?
Well, I'll go back to kind of an earlier theme. Biggest obstacle, not to me personally, but to create anything, you need money. And that's, you know, you all have got, you got passions. We've talked about that. You've got ideas, and you're going to think of things that you want to do. And the money thing will always be there for you, unless your parents are worth multi-millions of dollars. But even then, it's always in the discussion, the money, how much money, what's the value. Of course, the other thing for me, and I'll just be very quick, is having the necessary experience to know what you're walking into. And I would say to you that if I wanted to leave you with anything besides the value and importance of understanding money, the value and importance of asking questions. And if you apply to your whole life, no matter where you are, asking the very basic journalism questions that nobody seems to care about anymore, but the who, what, why, where, when, and hows, it will always work to your advantage to get those questions answered, no matter where you are. Thank you, Alex, for the question.
Well, Mr. Lamb, I think you've certainly given us a lot to think about, and I think that your model of asking questions and the depth that you were able to get to with our students, I think is truly admirable. I do see a couple more questions, but I want to be mindful of your time, of course, Mr. Lamb, and your next engagement. But I want to.
Chris, let's just try it quickly, because I just got a couple minutes. And
okay. Sure, Natalie.
Well, Mr. Lamb, what's your passion? Like, you asked us what our passion was. What's yours?
One word. Absolutely one word. Learning. Period. If I learn during a daytime, during my waking hours, I am very excited. If I don't learn, I'm not very excited. So it's learning. Is there one other quick one, and we can? No.
I saw Cam at one point. You're welcome to go ahead, Cam.
I was just gonna say that we, at our age, we have grandparents and parents, and they often talk about how, oh man, like this is it's often painted as the worst it's ever been. As someone who's been in politics, for a long time, we've seen president resignations and assassinations, and we've been on the brink of nuclear war. Do you see this time period as one that we can and will recover from and be stronger for?
Yeah, absolutely. This is not the worst time in our history by any means. People tend to have very short memories. And I think, sadly, people in my own business have a very short memory. They have no sense of history. And just think through the Civil War. Just think through the Vietnam War, and you'll see just as many horrible things that were going on back then. And I will, the one thing that I'll always remember, and if you've never know anything about it, just look up the history of Spiro Agnew and ask yourself the question, how does that happen in today's age? And Spiro Agnew was the vice president of the United States. And it's a horrible story. It's a man who was vice president, former governor of Maryland, who took money physically in the vice president's office from a guy paying him off because he got a contract with the government. This is not a good period, but it's a learning period. And I would say, unlike a lot of people that I'm in my business, this is a time where democracy survived, and it survived because of the system. And it's the best hope we have, that the checks and balances. The biggest problem in our future is the lack of responsibility on the part of people in government to spend money that we don't have. you cannot survive forever with a $28 trillion deficit. And on that note, let me say how much I enjoyed seeing you all. And Tim Dombrow, who's been on this the whole time, we left alone because he's just shaky, and we didn't want to bother him. He's there on your screen. There's a nice picture of him. He's a nice fellow, nice young fellow. And Kristen Logan and Chris Malone, thank you very much. It's been fun, and I hope we haven't wasted everybody's time.
Fabulous. Thank you, Brian, very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, students. Thank you, Mr. Lamb. Thank you to our special guests as well. I hope everyone has a fantastic rest of their day. And again, thanks so much for jumping in this morning and engaging in a fantastic conversation.
Thanks, Juan.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.